Yeah. Therme Romani. Latin transliteration in Japanese.
Ohayo gozaimasu. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our July 26th service. Excuse me. Please join me in 1 minute of silent meditation. Discuss show prior to that. Thank you. We will now have chanting of Shoshinge, which is on page 20 in your red service book. You can chant along there, or there's an English translation on the bottom. Let's please gasho before we begin.
그러긴 된 시대 마그 공유의 저주소가 조복의 나이 그제 고고시의 시소주 주생여서 먼지포 무호무려 무행고 무게무다이고 행로 쇼교강비지에고 무당난시 무쇼고 조니지갑도 조딩세 이사이 군정을 고쇼 엄강묘고 소조고 시신신교감기인 조도각쇼다이네함 이시벤도 강조주 묘라이쇼이고 출세 유인세미라 엄강가이 오죽아그지 근조가이 오신묘라이 묘진공 노호이 진행기야이시 은왕본노 독대함 온쇼격보사의 유여슈시유하이지니 세슈신고조쇼고 이노스이하무묘함 성나이신소시윤무 조두신지신지땡 인연이고 그음무 음무시계 면으함 야기신텐교다이교기 서구오초세고 아드슈 이사이센 마그본드니 온시여라이 그제감 은건보다이 쇼게샤 제민묘 은나리게 미라브 홍강랜드 자겐교망 아드슈조 신교주지진리남 난주시남느가시 인도사이텐 시롱계 주나리지기시고소 겐다이쇼고세쇼이 묘묘라이 공세료기 샤가료라이 료가센 이슈고묘 난텐지 그규주라이지 슈도세 신노자이다무는게 센셀라이조무조 쇼강기지 쇼안다그 엔지남교도그로그 신교이교 시도라그 오크덴미라그 홍강 지넨소그지 유인조 유리노조 쇼조라이고 오호나이디 그세용 엔진모사도롱세 기묘무게 고묘라이 예수다라 빈신지 고센노초다이세강 고유홍강비에고 이거근조소이신 이유규도그다이 호가이 인자규다이 예수슈 도그시렌예 소세가이 소그쇼신요 호쇼신 유원노린겐진즈 유쇼지용지오게 원지동남묘den시 조도란쇼보사라이 삼소유시유교교 원쇼생교기양호 엔진보사롱주예 오도인가 겐세강 오겐네고유다리 소조시유신진 와그센 본드 신진호 쇼지쇼지 소유대함 이시무료고교도 쇼드슈조다이르게 노샤케쇼 노단쇼 유묘조도 가스그 안센지리 행건슈 엠만노그거 감센쇼 삼두산신계영공 소마호메 一生増悪地無税、四安業界小名だ。天道の国を仏性意。大愛上三行逆悪、法行行合憲因縁、大流本願大智慧、行者小中今後し、陽気一年相互、陽意大道逆三人、俗称発祥地上楽、遠心公開一大教、天理安行神一切、先祖終身反戦人、法権利用小伝流、国中悪に優勝流、大薬剤に摂取中、本能証言水風剣、大義無限上昇だ。本次元空明仏教、天民全幕本部に、新宗教商工演習、先着本願誘惑性、天内生寺因縁芸、天地上位昇進、即流逆上無理悪、一心地能流、有料大事修士の、上細無変国辱悪、同族自主同心、よいが心し。無阿弥
Thank you. Will everyone stand, if you're able, for Vandana Ti-Sarana, which is on page 17 of your red service book, and remain standing for three treasures. This will be led by Reverend Steve.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa buddham saranam gacchami dhammam saranam gacchami sangham saranam gacchami. Difficult is it to receive life in human form? Now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Buddha Dharma? Now we hear it. If we do not receive awakening in the present life, then in what life can we hope to receive it? Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we, together as one, begin on the great path of enlightenment, holding in our hearts supreme aspirations. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we, together as one, enter the storehouse of the Dharma and attain true wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in the Sangha. May we, together as one, uniting in harmony, strive to live for the enlightenment of all beings. The incomparable, deep, and profound Dharma is difficult to encounter even through countless ages of kalpas. Now we're privileged to hear and receive it. Let us endeavor to thoroughly understand the true meaning of the Buddha Dharma. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Okay, thank you. You may be seated.
Thanks all for your participation. We'll now have a message by Reverend Steve.
Hello there. Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? We're finally starting to get some cooler weather around here, getting a nice breeze. Could actually, open the door and not feel like I've opened up the air fryer. So things are cooling down. It's a perfect time to enjoy a Bon dance. Was just at Palolos this Friday. We had a really wonderful time. But in addition to going to the Bon dance, you can also go and see a movie. There's this little movie that came out just recently. It's doing okay. It's called The Odyssey. It's based on an ancient tale by Homer. It's an ancient Greek story. And it's got Matt Damon and all these famous actors in it. But, the story at its heart is a story about journeys. It's a story about traveling. And, we're a Mahayana Buddhist temple. So, that big vehicle we often are representing as this boat. So, there's always a metaphor and connection. But the big point of the story is that this warrior is returning from the Trojan War, from the Trojan horse we've all heard about. He came up with the idea, and after that he tries to get home. Well, and if this were a story where nothing went wrong, it would be the movie would have been over in 20 minutes, but it was almost 3 hours long, so that something has to have happened. So this is where he runs into the siren, cyclops, all these mythological monsters and things like that. It takes him 20 years to get home. And when he returns, he realizes how much he's changed. It's like one of the original stories that talks about going on a journey and coming back changed. It's the foundation for so many of the stories of adventure and journeys in human history, human writing. And so, that got me to think, 20 years seems like a pretty long time to be gone from your home. But, I'm coming up on 2016 is when I left Los Angeles. That's when I went on my journey to go to Japan to learn Japanese, to become a minister, and haven't really been back home at that time. So, thinking about the changes that we experience after we, have a big change in our lives, leaving home, going to college, moving to a different state or a different country, and to reflect back on the ways that we've changed. Another thing that I've been doing recently is, cleaning up the apartment. Because my mom and sister stayed with me during the Bon dance time, that means I have to clean everything up, clean up the mess and all that. And one of the things that I found was this. Kyoto to Nagasaki and back, summer 2009, Higashi Honganji Hoshidan tour. So back in 2009, when I was a member of the temple in Los Angeles, we had a quote-unquote youth tour to go to Japan to go see Higashi Honganji. Now, I was definitely no longer a youth. I was several years over the limit, but they made it possible for me to go on this trip. And I've talked about this before, but this is kind of a tumultuous time in my life. I'd just been laid off from my dream job. I was struggling with college. And so, I was spending a lot more time at the temple because, I had a lot more free time and I was looking for a direction in life. And so, this journey I took was one from Los Angeles to Japan. And this was the first time I'd really visited Higashi Honganji, really the first time I'd ever gone on visiting temples, first time seeing Nagasaki and the Peace Museum there. And this was a trip where Rinban Ito, the head minister over at LA, he asked if any of us would be interested in becoming ministers in the future. And maybe without really understanding what he was asking, I said, yes, I think I would be interested in that. And so, that's a journey that's taken me many, many years. And looking back at this photo book, it seems like a lifetime ago. I hope that you guys have lots of photo books of your travels, of your earlier years. I guess, you can just look at it on your phone nowadays. Everybody has their pictures stored on phone or on the cloud or something like that. But having a photo album, having a way of looking at how we were, gives us a chance of seeing how much we've changed over these years. Me, I haven't changed a bit. Still the selfish, lazy, absent-minded, all these different things. Those haven't changed, but the people I'm surrounded with have changed. In the time since leaving on that trip, I've had so many experiences, got to meet so many people, and it's really kind of forced me to get out of my bubble. And that, I realize now that I have learned so much from the people that I met on that journey. That's a story of the adventure, right? It's, all of these characters that you meet along the way, Momotaro and all these old legends, they have to do with the people that you meet, and that changes us. The adventures and the difficulties we go through, that changes us. There's so many stories that talk about, what would I do if I could do it all over again? What would happen if I time traveled, or I could send a message to my younger self, hey, invest in Microsoft, back in the 1980s or something like that. Hey, invest in Apple in the 1990s. All these different things that we think that we would do to change, to improve our happiness in the present day, to get rid of the difficult experiences we've had. I look back at, this 2009, I've gone through so much since then. The whole world has gone through so much since then. But even for those difficult times, I wouldn't want to change anything that happened, because I would not be here if any little detail was different. And that all those scrapes, all those difficulties that we have in life, they are revealed to us as things that make us who we are. All these things we can't help but to absorb. I always talk about that we're like the tofu bubbling in a pot of sukiyaki. we're absorbing all these flavors. And that if you didn't have the green onions, if you didn't have the beef, if you didn't have all those other ingredients in there, we would not have that same flavor. And that as we look back at who we were, we get to see, who it was that influenced us. We get to reflect on all these lessons that we've learned throughout the years. I think the Buddha Dharma is pushing us to open up that photo album of ourselves, to see what kind of people we used to be and who we are now, and see what that journey did to change us. We would be pretty boring people if we didn't change at all. That is really kind of like when Shakyamuni talks about like Jigoku or like the Buddhist hells and things like that in mythology. That's, the cycling through these patterns of staying the same, of trying to cling on to this past us, this, you see so many times people on social media nowadays, oh my gosh, I miss when I was 12 years old. Everything was much happier back then. We didn't have to worry about anything. Entire schools of political thought are built around the idea of bringing us back to this imagined past. But of course, when you look back to when you're 12, your parents were taking care of the rent. Maybe your mom or dad was cooking for you. You didn't have to worry about bills and things like that. Of course, it seemed happier then. But in the course of growing up, we learn all these difficult lessons. We absorb all of these flavors. They make us what we are. And that, I think one of the wonderful things about Buddhism is that all of our teachers have gone through the same process. Shinran Shonin didn't jump fully formed out of his father's head like Athena or anything like that. Shinran Shonin, he had to go through all these trials and tribulations. He came in contact with the teachings, and that changed him. He went on this long journey, up to Niigata and back to Kyoto, and the things that he experienced and the people he met changed him. The farmers that he met in Niigata, the very poor people who could not help but to take lives in order to sustain themselves, to make a living, who had to hunt and fish, that was a taboo back in the day. But he realized that, we live having all these experiences. They make us who we are. And that, what would be Buddhism if it rejected you for having these experiences? The wonderful thing is that everybody that we talk to is like our Buddha and Bodhisattva, even if they don't realize it. Our teachers, the people that we see on TV, the people that we met, they're all reflecting the teachings, whether it be impermanence, interconnectedness, all these different aspects of the teachings are filtered through and they're reflected by the human beings and the situations that we meet. And so, we're absorbing all of that. Of course, naturally, we pass that on to the people who meet us. That, we hear something in a Buddhist study class, in a Shoshinge study class, we incorporate that into our lives and we share that with other people. We're on a journey that does not end as long as we're alive. We're always going to be having these new adventures. We're always going to be encountering these difficult things. But as we change, as we adapt, we get to see a little bit more of the Buddha Dharma. We get to understand a little bit better how fragile life is, or how important the connection with other people is. And really, I think what Buddhism is setting off on a journey to return to ourself. We are going out into the world, we're having these adventures, and then we try to find our way back to who we really are. I talk about having a messy house. How many times do you go through the stuff in your house and you realize how much of it is just junk? Stuff that you bought just because, you think it would make you happy. But when you get down and you find these precious things, maybe something that you received from a parent, some kind of wonderful memory, like, these are the things that lead us back to ourselves, the the map of the ocean currents of our minds. Sorry, that's a little. Those are the things that we should cherish. And that when you strip away all this extra stuff we built up around ourselves, that's why this is called Jodo Shinshu. It's that Shinran Shonin, he had seen that Buddhism had kind of gotten crowded with all this extra stuff that was layered on top of it. Let's strip that down. Let's get this down to this idea of like the teachings themselves. What was Shakyamuni really trying to bring us before all this extra stuff got loaded on? And so, we can find that, we can see the world as it really is, we can see ourselves as we really are, as flawed beings who are embraced nonetheless. We have this light of the Buddha that is always trying to bring us in, always trying to wake us up. And if we can come to that realization of ourselves, that we're worthy of finding this truth, that we can confidently sail on that sea and return to ourselves, to the real selves. And it doesn't have to take 3 hours. So thank you very much for listening, everybody. Thank you for coming. One thing that I do wish that I had done before I had taken off is I wish I had taken a Japanese class like Betty is teaching. If any of you here, Betty Santoki, she's teaching a great Japanese class. So don't make my mistake. Don't go to Japan not knowing how to say anything. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Steve, for your entertaining talk. I always say this, but you always leave us with a lot of food for thought. And, our experiences make us who we are. And we don't realize, I guess, how much we've changed because of it. But thank you very much. A few announcements. Today at noon, Japanese class for travelers in Otani Center, led by Betty Santoki. Tuesday, the 28th at 10 a.m., Shinran Shonin Memorial Service, in person and YouTube. At 3 on Tuesday is ukulele band practice, in person and Zoom. And at 5:30 is a busy day. 5:30 is dinner and movie night in the conference room. Therme Rome. Interesting. Okay, now we're into August. The 1st, Saturday at 10 a.m., Buddhism 101 class in person in the conference room. August 2nd, Sunday, 10 a.m. is Shotsuki Memorial Service, in person, YouTube. The Dharma message will be by Rimban Takami Inoue. On the second, Sunday at noon, Japanese for Travelers class, Otani Center. And at 11:30 on the same day is the Photography Club conference in the conference room. Now, if you're able, please rise for Ondokusan, which is on page 112. Please join me in Gassho. This concludes our service for today. Thank you everyone for coming and hope to see you all next week.